G'day folks, and welcome to what will probably be the last report of this campaign game. I'm midway through turn 13, and it's a fascinating game, wonderful game, amazing game design. I'm reaching a point where getting a bit of a burnout just from this. So basically, I'm almost 2 weeks into playing this. I've been playing this for close to 2 weeks, and I'm only about not even a quarter of the way through. In addition, the turns are running longer and longer. There's a lot more administration, and it's slower to work through. It's becoming more difficult to sort of assess the situation and flick through stacks. More fiddly. Stacks are becoming sort of taller, and looking to the future, the situation is starting to stabilize. It'll become more of a sort of a grinding situation, increasingly so. And there are still, in a 50 turn campaign, still looking at another 37 turns. As I said, roughly one quarter of the way through, still 3/4 to go. And if I continue through with that, I'm probably still looking at another 6 weeks plus of gaming. As I said, I'm slowing down, having less time to actually get to this. And because it is such a big game, it takes up pretty much my whole table. Charts everywhere. Behind me, I've got rule books and charts and exclusive rules everywhere. These are just all over the couch because they don't fit. I've got stuff on the floor. I've actually taken up 2 couches full of sort of charts and tables and things like that. That's in addition to sort of what you can see spread throughout the table. Sort of on the left and the right here, that's the Russian reinforcement, turn-based reinforcements over here, casualty boxes down here, special reinforcement groups up there. So it's a big game, taking up a lot of space and a heck of a lot of time, is the bottom line. And I'm not prepared to spend another 6 weeks sort of grinding through the situation. I think the Russians have done well. I think they'll stabilize. Germans get these kind of wave of momentum. I'm kind of curious to see how it works out. But basically, there are other things I want to move on to. I'll do a sort of full, I'll call it a preliminary review rather than an actual review, because as I said, I haven't finished the campaign, but I have a good sense of how this game plays. But bottom line is, this is a game that I enjoy. A game that I really admire the design efforts. You have to respect the detail that Vance von Borries and the development team, I recognise this as a team effort, have gone into to test this out, to innovate the system and so forth. But it's a heavy monster, and I think my eyes were bigger than my belly. I kind of thought I would be able to play through this quite quickly, and I think I've done pretty well in the first, like I said, of those last 2 weeks to get 12, 13 turns in, but things are really starting to slow down. Just today, trying to get through this 13th turn, there's a lot to work through. The one thing I will admit I don't like is the air combat and air management. I find that just very cumbersome and quite frustrating to work through. So that's kind of, it impacts my morale a little bit. I don't want to have to manage these air units. It becomes quite frustrating. What else? I think there's a lot of administration surrounding this game. Just in this last turn, the Axis turn, they had, I think, maybe 4 combats, but there's a lot of checking of supplies. There's a lot of moving of supply units and moving of there's a lot taking place. It's a monster, and that is getting increasingly slow to work through. It's becoming increasingly difficult because of the more condensed environment over which they're fighting. Up here in particular, it's about to happen down here, trying to figure out who has moved, who hasn't moved, where it's getting quite difficult in this area to see where the roads are. I'm always picking up stacks. That kind of situation that you see when you've got dense stacking. And this is not I recognize there are games like OCS where you have even high density stacking, but I've never been a fan, I'll admit, of games with high density stacking. I think I've always said I prefer games that use the space on the map. And the first 10 turns of this was amazing, a wonderful experience, where the Germans are racing ahead using these road networks and so forth. Now it's starting to bog down to that sort of grinding situation where you are really flicking through stacks. I mean, the Germans up here, you're allowed to inspect stacks, of course, in this game. And the Germans are just looking through stacks, looking for that vulnerable point, which they found up here. But that takes a long time to think about and plan, which is both a sort of positive aspect of the game, but it's also an aspect of the game that slows things down. It means it's a game that you can really sit down and study and explore if you have the time. At present, as I said, I've got these games lined up behind me and I really want to move on to something else. So I'm not stopping because this is in any way a bad game or there's something wrong with it. Air combat aside, I'll talk about that later. Everything else is really fascinating. It's just 2 weeks in and I'm thinking about the future. I'm thinking 6 more weeks of increasingly longer, slower, more difficult turns, kind of requiring careful planning of where I'm sending my MSUs and how I'm moving my panzer divisions around and where the infantry needs to go. And then you've got the Russian side and these long thought processes again. And then you've got air combat management. A lot of people are probably saying, the air combat system's pretty quick and easy. It takes me, as a relatively inexperienced player, longer to do air combat than it does to do, a lot longer in fact, probably 3 times as long to do air combat. Think about the units I'm sending in, do the resolution, the die rolls. Probably more than 3 times longer, 4 or 5 times longer to do air combat than it does to do ground combat. And at the end of that air combat, you do all this work for usually a -2 dice roll modifier for the Germans because the Soviets just don't have strong air units. They're starting to compete, but still a way behind. So look, the interesting thing is, I think I mentioned in the previous video how the Germans felt like they were doing really well. I think I get the sense the Soviets may be beginning to stem the flow of Russia, stem the Axis advance. They've started to push. You can see over here, Roslavel. They've pushed the Germans out of there. They're pushing them back here. I think they're doing very well to hold them north of Orsha up here. They're holding this position here. These units are now surrounded, so it's likely they'll have to fall back. But there are a lot of Russian units in that area, and there aren't too many. As I said, the Germans are sitting on 47 victory points, which sounds like a lot, but they need to get a lot more. So here's the victory schedule for scenario 8. They need 90 victory points to get a marginal victory. So they need at least 43 more victory points. And I don't know how they get them. Okay, so do they keep grinding and maybe grab Smolensk? That's worth a lot. Do they try to renew this offensive down the south towards Gomel? That's worth a little bit. Or they try and find it. I don't know. There's a lot that could be happening. That could happen in the future over what could be several more weeks of gameplay. The big conclusion I'm drawing from this is I'm keen to play this again, but I'll play it on Vassal. As I said, I want to set something else up and play something else. it'd be wonderful if I could just take all this and throw it on Vassal and continue playing. But yeah, I want the space back. I want the couches back. you know, yeah, this is such a big, sprawling monster of a game. Tables and charts and maps everywhere. Yeah, so as I said, it hangs in the balance. I'm not calling this either way for the Axis or the Soviets. I feel like the Germans are marginally ahead, but over the past three turns, Soviets have really clawed back in terms of both recapturing objective hexes, in terms of slowing down the rate of German advance. Germans are still kind of creeping forward, but it's a creep. You know, they're creeping forward, punching little holes in the line. The Soviets are now able to rally more effectively. There's no big breakthroughs anymore. We still have these panzer divisions here, but these guys are actually pulling back. They're pulling back away from this area here. They were over here, they've withdrawn, and they're trying to link up on the east side of the Dnieper, around Orsha here. So this is a German withdrawal, in fact, towards the towards the rear. An advance towards the rear, we can call it. Because they are trying to push these Soviets, that they are, out of that area. Yeah. And so a lot of Soviet strength throughout this area. They've got their headquarters now. Headquarters was pulling back, I think. Yeah, headquarters there, headquarters down here. Two headquarters down the south here. So, yeah. So, folks, wrapping this up, I'm going to call it a bit of a draw. Unresolved conflict. But I really do hold this game in very high regard, and I don't want to give the impression that I'm quitting because I think this is a bad game. Far from it. Outstanding game design that really, really, more than anything else I've ever played, captures that feeling of the offensive, Operation Barbarossa. Yeah, it's just... yeah, as I said, I think I bit off more than I chew. Thought I'd be able to get through it a lot quicker. And keen, as I said, just keen to move on to other things. So, I hope you've got a sense of how this all plays out. Again, this is only a quarter of the way through. There's a whole heap of other... This is scenario 8 of 8 scenarios. The other scenarios are shorter, quicker. There's a lot of depth in this game. So check it out. Barbarossa, Army Group Centre.